All right, in this video, what I want to do is show you how to do labels and buttons. And we're going to compare and contrast how you would do that in UIKit versus SwiftUI. So let's get started. In this project that you see right here, I've just got a simple UIKit project set up, and we'll go from here. So I'm going to click on the plus, and I'm going to go click label, and I'm going to drag the label into our storyboard here. And then as opposed to SwiftUI, that will pretty much do all of your layouts for you relatively easily. In UIKit, we're going to need to specify various constraints. So I'm going to say, for example, that this is centered in the middle of the canvas there, or in the middle of our storyboard, which I just did. So I added those constraints. And then the other thing is we don't want this to be fixed as a fixed value. Let's say we want to dynamically change the text over time. So that means we're going to need to create an outlet for this. So I would drag this over, and I'll call it message label. So we'll give it a name. And now we have our outlet here that we can access. So anytime we access message label, something is going to change over here. So in our view.did.load, let's say we wanted to change the value from label to hello world. I would say message label dot text equals hello world. And if I do command B, I get a successful compile. And let's do a command R to run the simulator. And as I run the simulator, we should see hello world pop up right in the middle. And we do. So that's good. So now let's do that same thing in SwiftUI. So we're going to pop over here to my SwiftUI program, our app, and you'll see here that we have the canvas, and I won't explain the canvas again because we've got other videos that do that, but this is the primary area where you should be working on your SwiftUI stuff, and this would be a typical template for a starting point for a SwiftUI app. So what we're going to do is, first of all, recognize that this thing right here, this view, which is declared as text with a string argument that's supplied here, is the same as a label. So labels in UIKit should map to text views in SwiftUI. And so what we can do, let's just take off this modifier for a minute so that we're exactly like the other example, and we'll put label in here. And notice as we do this, this is changing right here as well, right? So it's dynamically following whatever we're doing. But what we want to do is we want to be able to dynamically change this over time. And so if you think about functions and variables and passing data into this, that's what you want to think about when we do this. So there's no IB outlets related to this at all. What you do is you come up here in this struct and you declare a new variable. We'll call it message, and we'll give it something. We'll just start out with label. So now message is basically set to this string value, and message is what would be put here. So this would be just basic programming. And now we have a text label here, which will take on the string based on this message. And if we resume here, just to get us up to date, we see that we have label here. So now the question is, how do we change this when this launches? Very similar to view.did.load. So the way we do that is there is a modifier that you can put on your view that says .on up here. And what this is any code that you put between these brackets right here after your .on up here, which is really attached as a modifier or an attribute of text, any code you put here will run when this view appears. So here we could say message equals hello world. Now, if we do that and we do a command B, we do get a compiler error. And the reason for that is that this property of a struct is immutable unless we make it mutable. And the way we make it mutable is by saying @state. So this would be new in SwiftUI. But doing @state, what happens is now message can be changed. So notice we're not getting any compiler errors anymore. It's also the case that whenever this does change, this view will be re-rendered. So it will look and say, oh, message changed value. So now whatever I'm putting in this view over here has to take on this new value. So these state variables cause re-renderings to occur inside our views. So once we've made this change here, notice over here on the right, it actually is putting in hello world. This dot on appear is actually running right here in the canvas, and it is putting that value there. So that's how we would do this in SwiftUI. So let's go back to UIKit now and put a button in. So I'm going to go back to UIKit, and we're going to bring a button, and I'm going to put a button, say, centered under the label and maybe 20 points below it. So to do that, we're going to make sure the storyboard's selected, hit add, we'll type in button. I'm going to drag the button, we'll drag it down here, wherever. But what I'm first going to do is say you need to be horizontally centered, so I can do that. And then I'm going to add a constraint that says that you are going to be 20 points below the label above you. And now we're fully constrained, and we've got the button where we want. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to say, well, we want the button to actually do something when tapped. And the way we do that in UIKit is with IB actions. So if I click and drag this over, and we'll call it button tapped, then it's now created a function that is an IB action, which means when this is tapped, this will be called. And we can put whatever code we want in here. So it seems like this is what we want in there. So I'm going to take this out and put it here. So it doesn't happen when it first runs, but it will happen when the button is tapped. Everything else here would remain the same. And so now let's go ahead and let's make sure this builds, which it does. Now let's go ahead and run it in the simulator. So bring the simulator over. Good. And if I click on button, it changes to hello world. So that's UIKit. Let's go do this in SwiftUI. So I'm going to come back to SwiftUI, and now we're going to add this button in. So we're going to go up here to add, and we're going to see button. We're going to drag button, and this time using the canvas can help us out here. I'm going to put it right underneath hello world, and when I do that, notice that it actually adds the button into a VStack, and we could have used a VStack in UIKit. That would have been a few more steps. But this we get for free. So it basically, when it added it, it said, you're going to need to put it in a VStack because you can only have one view as this view that is returned for this property body. So another nice way to do that is just start with a VStack and then add the things in vertically, or you could have an HStack, whatever. But notice it put in a button for us. So it actually wrote the code over here for us for a button. And now for action, I'm going to go ahead and just put in some curly brackets, which is where I can define the function that runs whenever the button is tapped. And content can be anything. It doesn't have to be text. It could be an image. It could be whatever. But let's just say text tap me, and that will go there. And so notice it's changing this right here. That's looking good. And I think we're ready to actually put a message in here. So let's do this. Let's take this on appear out because we don't need it. We're not running, just like in the UIKit with view did load, we removed it from that, but we only want it to do it when it is tapped. So message equals hello world, and that is what we want to run. So if I look over here on the left, I see that I've got a green status here, which is good. But if I click on tap me or label, tap me is not doing anything. And the reason is because this is sort of in the mode where you're manipulating the UI. So rather than manipulate the UI, we actually want to run it, and we can run it right here in the canvas. And we do that by just clicking this little play button here. So if I do live preview, and now when I tap on tap me, look, it actually changes the value. So it ran this code over here, and it set message to hello world. That state variable was changed, and then this was all re-rendered based on that change. So we're not perfectly compatible with the UIKit because I haven't done the 20 points down. But the interesting thing is VStack actually gives us a little bit of help as far as spacing between things. So what we can do is, let's just click out of this a second, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say Control Option and look at my spacing values here. And I'm doing it here on the VStack rather than trying to pick the VStack over here on the right, because sometimes it's kind of hard to pick it when it wants to pick some of the things inside it. So I'll just do it here on the code, which is great. And I'm going to just say 20 here. And what that's going to do is, for every spaced item or every item in the VStack, it's going to put in 20 points of padding. And so there we go. We got that, and that's all there was to it for adding that 20-point constraint.